Welcome to another edition of the Neja Chuan podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This week we are continuing with our discussion of Wang Chin Sheng. In this one we talk about the connection between his Pa Kua Journal and the Yiguan Dao philosophy. This is from an interview with one of his students from the Pa Kua Journal. He also discusses the hierarchy, if you will, of Tai Chi, Xingyi, and Pa Kua in Wang Chin Sheng's system, at least in his opinion, and which one works best for beginners, which one is more the advanced one. And we discuss that a little bit and get into some of the different opinions on that topic there. And in the Patreon episode this week, we are continuing with our Qi disease controversy. This is the article that Bruce Francis wrote in 1992. So this one we discuss some spiraling energy body postures. So hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.
Today we're going to continue our look at the great Pa Kua, Xingyi, and Tai Chi master Wang Chin Sheng of Taiwan. This season we've talked a lot about one of the great masters of that era, Zhang Zhenfeng. And as we were explaining the last couple of episodes, Wang Chin Sheng was his associate and fellow teacher of that same era. And they were both two of the most prominent and popular and best known in the West, along with guys like Cheng Man-cheng and a couple others, but not too many of them were as well known as Zhang and Wang. So it's been interesting looking at the early history of Wang Chin Sheng, and we're going to continue to finish the article by Huang Chin Sheng, interviewed by Kent Howard in 1991 from the Pa Kua Journal newsletter, volume 2, number 2. A really good interview. Huang's really seems like a super personable, cool guy. And last episode, he and his friends won the karate tournament using Tai Chi, or they got disqualified for using Tai Chi, basically. But that's when they realized Wang Chin Sheng's stuff was for real. So a little bit further in the article, he says, he goes back to Wang Chin Sheng's religious affiliation, which is a big part of Wang Chin Sheng's teachings. Everybody who was a student of his or talks about him, his martial arts were one big part of his life, but his religious activities were another big thing that he was known for. That was his other great passion. And even Westerners were even recruited into this Yiguan Dao movement. So it was one of the first interfaces between Westerners coming into and actually participating in a Taoist cult, you might say, in the 1960s. And so that's why that movement's pretty well known, especially among martial arts people who are crossing over with this back in Taiwan back in the day. So the question starts off with, few people realize that Wang Chin Sheng was a leader of a religious movement. Can you explain a bit about that? Wang Chin Sheng was a principal leader of the Yiguan Dao religion. He and some other mainlanders of some distinction were prime movers in spreading the movement throughout Taiwan and Japan. He says that the nationalist government, as with most governments in the last few hundred years, was quite nervous about Yiguan Daoists because of the many influential persons involved in the movement. Few people know about Wang Chin Sheng's role because there were reasons to be secretive. Back then, there was a fair amount of persecution of sect members, or perhaps I should say surveillance. But now there's only a little of that. But as always, there's still a lot of misunderstanding. So like we were saying last time, the powers that be never really liked Yiguan Dao because of their drawing from multiple different religions. And also because, as he says here, there was prominent people involved. So there was some power within that group, especially back then.
That's usually why groups are persecuted, is because there's people that have power in them.
Right. And popular movements that are gaining steam are always looked at.
Because if nobody, if it's a bunch of grandmas that aren't doing anything, who cares about that? Being a religious group in China has never been a particularly safe occupation, right? And so,
unless you're the one at the top, then it's great because you're getting the emperor's
right. But even then,
flow.
you got a target on your back, right? I mean, so it's
somebody else knock you off, yeah. Well, I noticed an example of that in China when I was visiting Wudong Mountain, like the cult of Xuan Wu, the dark warrior god of the north. When they came to prominence, the emperor was just showering cash on them for generations, for hundreds of years. They were making big bucks. So that, being a follower of Xuan Wu must have been really well paying at a certain point. Like when your guy's on top and you're getting that direct flow of cash from the government, shit, it's probably the best thing you could ask for. So he says that Iguan means consistent or unwavering. Tao means the way or path. Iguan Tao is more of a philosophy than a religion, since we believe in all five major religions: Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, Islam, and Christianity, as different expressions of the same universal and unwavering Tao. Ironically, because we believe that each religion is equally great and true, we have been uniformly reviled and persecuted by all. Therefore, for many dynasties, Iguan Taoists have learned not to stick their necks out too far, lest they be chopped off. Thus, you get the label of secret society. Iguan Tao promotes peace and harmony among all people, which is at times a dangerous concept.
Neutrality is not always a popular position.
Right.
Man, you
Right.
gotta pick a side, buddy.
Right. Yeah, it's interestingly upsetting when someone believes that everyone is
Well, I
good.
mean, especially when you have wars between religious groups, it's sort of
Right. You can't ride the fence when it hits
hard to
the
ride the
fan.
fence on that one.
So the interviewer asks, does your philosophy also apply to internal arts? Absolutely. Iguan Taoists have always used Taoist type internal exercises. We believe in Datso, sitting meditation, is essential for developing a center. Without internal calm, you cannot control your emotions or actions. In fact, this type of meditation is actually more important in developing Bagujang skills than circle walking. And there is really nothing special you have to do. Just sit quietly and empty your mind. It is so easy, but no one does it. Everyone expects everything to be so complicated and unattainable. What a pity. It's all at your fingertips. That's kind of an interesting one. I mean, for some Bagua schools, sitting meditation is interwoven with the walking practices. And he's saying it doesn't need to be all that complicated. Just clearing your mind and letting go of thoughts and stuff might be the way.
Practice, yeah, that's not hard, but getting to the point that you can do that takes a lot of training. So yeah,
I
but
mean, and
that,
has been a thread throughout our podcast is like that mind training could give you
well,
an edge in combat that is worth having.
your martial arts gets better if your mind is clear, and your
Right.
mind can be clearer if your
Right.
body, healthy.
Yeah, that's kind of I just feel like that's been a running thread throughout the last 5 years of our podcast. It's like
Well,
this
that is, yeah.
meditative side of stuff isn't just a fluffy add-on. It's actually a fundamental core principle that actually gives you an advantage when you're clashing with somebody. It doesn't may not seem like it, but when you use it, your mind, having that clearer mind is a massive factor.
Yeah, well, if you're shitting your pants, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're not going to do it very well.
So he says, after the excesses of the Japanese during the war with China, Wang Shujin was interested in trying to steer them away from their aggressive outlook, which he thought was not really inherent in their true nature. So in the 1960s, he began to make trips to Japan to teach martial arts and Iguandao philosophy. He showed repeatedly through demonstration how strong, aggressive karate attacks could be easily defeated by avoiding or absorbing the blows, and how developing unseen internal power does not invite attack. Bagua is that way. When people see me practicing, they think it looks like nothing, just an old man dancing in circles. I like the part about how developing unseen power does not invite attack. And that's, again, like, does external martial arts work? Yes. Does internal martial arts? Yes. That works too. One advantage internal martial arts has is it doesn't look like much. It's not impressive. Like, you're not punching a heavy bag, causing thunderous blows to just shock the whole, frame of the house, jumping off the foundations every time you kick the shit out of the bag. Like, it doesn't have that external appearance. So it doesn't alert people. It doesn't cause their adrenaline to rush when they see you practicing and, in quotes, invite attack. It doesn't draw attention. And especially in maybe 1800s China, where this comes from, it probably makes sense to not invite attention, especially if you're an Iguan Dao, cult
Well, I
member and
mean,
you
it's
don't want
also,
people checking you out.
I mean, it's the sort of thing of like, if you're walking around with an attitude like, well, look at me, look how tough I am, right? Yeah, it's going to invite people to challenge you. You don't, if you just kind of, it's the quiet guy at You know, it's the little quiet guy you got to worry about, not the loud
Right.
big guy, right? Like, you know, and that's kind of what this is this, you know, the idea that you don't have to. I mean, you can be a sledgehammer or you can be a scalpel, right? And martial arts where you're just based on, you know, kicking and hitting as hard as you can and, you know, slamming the person, you know, like with your body and knocking them to the ground. That's a sledgehammer. You're just trying to, you know, hit them harder than they can hit you. Um, that's one way of fighting. Another way of fighting is to slip into all those little gaps inside of the human body and just dissect it, you know, like a just cut it apart like a butcher, you know, and that's kind of the you know the internal martial arts approaches, and that's why like Bruce uses the term reverse medicine, right?
Hmm.
Because it's not just banging on them; it's taking them apart. You know, it's de destabilizing their structure. It's um, understanding how the angles of the human body work. It's understanding how pressure moves through the human body. It's understanding how leverage works in martial arts. It's all these sort of principles that have to happen in a millisecond, right? And that's where the, if you will, the meditation comes in because you can only really do that if your mind isn't clouded by trying to figure out what's going on in the moment. You know, unnameable thing that people find, you know, the zone, right? Where you're just
Hmm.
in it and by the nature of being in it, you can't describe it, right? This is
There
the
you
Tao
go.
that can be told, you know, blah, blah, blah. Right. So you can't really describe what it's like to someone to get hit, right? It's like you can describe sort of what it feels, but you know, it's like you don't really get it until it happens. So it's the same thing with hitting someone else, right? That there's a certain amount of you got to experience it for it to um, be real. And the same goes for the internal stuff, right? Like until you spend the time to really feel um, your internal organs will just be a concept in your head, right? Like they'll be doing stuff and you won't have any knowledge of it. I mean, that was, you know, Wang Jing. The first thing he said to Bruce, you know, was, "Can you feel your liver?" Right? You know, Bruce looked at him like he was crazy, and he said, "Well, you know, who'd you sell it to?" Right? This idea that like it's yours, it's your body, it's your stuff, you know, and if you can't feel it and really be comfortable in it, doing internal martial arts is very difficult.
Yeah.
You know, it can be done, but it's not going to be very effective.
Right. It's integral to the training.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because the next thing he mentions that and says, the interviewer asks, "Have you considered writing a book?" Actually, I did write one once. It was on my teacher's Tai Chi. I finished the text and I even had the photographs taken, but then I shelved the project. I just did not think I could truly get across the feeling in the words. How do you explain internal energy or chi or the proper alignment of the form? And that's what you were saying. It's super hard to describe it on a page or in words or even on a video. It's kind of got to be felt and experienced. And as a book collector, I'm super bummed that he didn't publish that because that would have been super cool to see. The Chimpan Ling form, you know,
Yeah.
that'd be rad to have a book on it. There's not
And
too
it was
many.
well, again, it's think about the structure of most Tai Chi books, right? You're trying to fit it into a, you know, you don't want to have 800, you know, thousand
Yeah,
page
I mean, it's a
book,
long
right?
ass form.
So most of what it is it's pictures of the postures and a quick description of how you get from one posture to the next, which sometimes includes a application, right? So, you know, as you move from point A to point B, you deflect the person's hand and you turn to the other side and you do blank, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, that leaves out pretty much all the stuff about what you're actually feeling and doing inside your body. That's just the external part. So you can also write a book about what the internal stuff is, which would be essentially a meditation Qigong book, right? So it's a lot of words to get
Yeah,
across what you could probably show somebody in 10 hours or something.
right.
It's not that it can't be done, but it's that the amount of work that has to go into it to do it is not really worth what you get from it compared to just doing it with someone, right? So
Yeah,
it's why a lot of this stuff, I think, um, I mean, a lot of it's also just it's very amorphous, right? So like again, I mean, how do you just even just breathing, right? I mean, how do you describe breathing, right? I mean, it's like it's you could just say in and out, right? But you can also talk about the sensation that happens and the anatomical things that happen and blah blah blah, right? And then and all this. And so again, I mean, I think it's just to do it would take a day. To write it would take 4 or 5 years, you know?
right. Yeah, so that's pretty standard stuff. Um, Next he asks an interesting question. Did Wang Shujin have a successor? If you mean someone who took over as master, no. At least no one I'm aware of. Although there were many good students trained by him who were very competent to teach, Wang Shujin's best student that I knew was my senior, Zhang Yizhang. His Bagua, Tai Chi, and Xingyi were all excellent. He went to the USA to teach many years ago. Unfortunately, I've lost contact with him. But there are other practitioners here in Taiwan that are also quite good. One such man is named Wang Fulai. So those are kind of the two
No
main,
relation to Wang Shijing.
right, no relation. Those are the two main guys whose name come up. The early generation right-hand man was this guy, Zhang Yizhang, or in Japan known as Cho Sensei. And he taught quite a few foreigners in Japan and directed them towards Wang Shijin in Taiwan.
Yeah, well, we talked about him a lot, didn't
Yeah, I mean we've mentioned him quite a few times. He seems like a real interesting character. He passed away some years ago here in California, and I've never run across him or his students besides Marnix and Kumar.
we?
But I think his school
Oh,
continues. Joe
what's his
Deisher was
name?
the guy in San
Joe
Jose.
Deisher, yeah.
I'm sure he's still doing
I don't know.
it.
Yeah.
And he also brings up Wang Fulai in Taipei. I mean, not Taipei, in Taiwan, southern Taiwan. And our friend Mike Strong used to train with him.
Right.
So then we move on to advice for practicing Bagua. He says, your practice should be Kuan from beginning to end. Keep a still center. Let the power rise from the sacrum. Let the waist lead the arms and the hips lift the legs. Do meditation, both sitting and standing. So he's also got some principles as well, some Wang Shijin's principles. But overall, it sounds like there's a high emphasis on the meditation, the centering, the equan, the just what he calls constant, unwavering awareness. And I think that relates to what we often were taught about gaps in awareness. How if your mind glitches out, that's when your opponent can strike you. So if you have constant, unwavering awareness while you practice, then you bring that into your two-person training. Then that's a big advantage that internal martial arts can give you. That level of concentration and just unwavering intention. I'd say that's a running theme as well through this internal martial arts.
Well, that's just that. Yeah, I mean, that's back to that mind connection, right? I mean, pretty much everything in internal martial arts on some level involves, how you do a thing and then what your mind is doing while you do that thing. So it's the action and the the doing of the thing and the feeling of the thing both have to be happening at the same
Mm,
time.
mm. Yeah, and that's what he felt it's so hard to communicate through a book or a non-present teaching is that feeling behind it that's so critical.
It is not the easiest thing, yeah, for sure.
So he says, why do you teach so few students, Bagua? Because it's so difficult to teach and to understand. If one is well coordinated, the form can be taught fairly easily. But many people do not practice enough to really grasp the feeling and thus the use. It's frustrating to see people start something and then quit. Most students tend to continue in Tai Chi because you can do it in a big group with lots of friends. Also, it's fairly easy to learn the essentials if you practice daily and relax in the postures. Pa Kua is quite different. There are only a few people who practice it. It moves at a more tiring pace, and there's only a few movements, which you repeat over and over. Many students who do not quit still often never understand the basic principles in an intuitive way. You can't just dance your way through the form. You have to feel it. It has to be Kuan, unwavering, consistent. There's that emphasis again.
Right. I mean, he just keeps using that same phrase over and over.
And I mean, I guess in Bagua, he's got a point. Like you don't have a whole lot of different postures you go through. You got 8 palm changes. You just grind over and over, and you got to develop a mental, unwavering, unbroken awareness in order to really get that feeling that he's talking about.
Certainly helps.
He says, of the internal martial arts, which do you consider the most difficult? To do it really well, I would have to say it's Tai Chi. And if you cannot go deeply into Tai Chi, you should try Bagua. And if you can't do Bagua, then you can always try Xing Yi. And if you cannot do Xing Yi, then I suppose there's always Shaolin. If worst comes to worst, I guess you can do Shaolin.
Well, I guess that's the idea of just better. Any practice is better than nothing.
I mean, that's not exactly nice to Shaolin. I mean, what do you think? You think
Ooh.
Tai Chi is the hardest?
I think it depends on how you do it. Put it simply, I think Tai Chi is more difficult mentally, Bagua is more difficult physically. It's sort of like Mac versus PC debate, It's sort of like, well, what are you using it for, and what are you trying to get out of it? Because
Hmm,
they ultimately do the same thing, but they
true.
have different specialties, right? So you're really
Right.
kind of splitting hairs at this point about, which one's better than what. Because, like I said, I think ultimately it's what you put into it. And I think what usually when people say, oh, this one's more advanced than that one, they're just talking about the one that they choose to make the more complicated one, in a sense, right? Like,
Hmm.
because, you can make any of them super complicated and deep essentially, but it's just usually people pick one to say, okay, this is the one where I'm gonna um, put it all together, right? So, like for example, I think with Liu Hong Jie, I think that Wu style was kind of his, um, his opus or whatever, where like, he wanted to put everything into this form that was digestible to everybody, right? Where
Right.
I think his Bagua actually goes deeper than the Tai Chi, but it's way harder to, it's probably only accessible to about a third of the number of people, right? So, that's kind of my take on that sort of thing is how many people are you trying to appeal to versus, what level of practice are you trying to get to?
Makes sense. And I think yeah, it's like each of them develops the mind in a different way. Xing Yi develops that mind of calmness by standing. Bagua, you circle so much your mind calms down. Tai Chi, you go hella slow so your mind can connect. So I can see the genius in all three of them, and that maybe that's why all these masters of the past decided to adopt all three of them. Maybe each day
Yeah,
you
I
feel a
mean,
little different.
I think it's more work essentially. If you're, it's like trying to learn three languages is more work than one.
Right,
But
definitely.
at the end of the day, all of them tend to be more well-rounded, if you will, if you do all of them, which is why a lot, I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of people start with something like Xing, then they do, Bagua, and then later on they do Tai Chi, or, sometimes they do Xing and then they do Tai Chi, and then they do Bagua. I mean, because what it basically comes down to is I think you start to see, let's just call it gaps in your training, things that you're missing. And you see in the other arts things that are possibly going to fill that gap, right? And so or give you some other thing that you were looking for that you haven't found yet. So like I knew a lot of people early on who never could quite get the fighting thing they were looking for from Bagua because they
Mm,
didn't because they were looking for basically a more direct kind of every move is a technique and and just sort of a more violent kind of approach to things. So they would go to something like praying mantis, or later on it was people would do jujitsu or something like that was more just technique. Um, Emphasis on the practical application over solo forms and things like that, right?
yeah.
So, and again, I mean, I always just go back to that depends on what you're looking for, right? I mean, if you're looking for that sledgehammer approach, right, and you just want to be able to smash anything that you feel scared of, right? That's a different kind of training. This is looking to get to this point of essentially, it's like I'm gonna use my mind instead of just my strength, right? Like I'm gonna use my ability to have a human analytical thinking, comprehending mind, and I'm gonna apply that to my body, right? And that's the Negong part of it, right? I'm gonna use my mind to influence how my body works. It's not that you can completely override how things naturally work, but you can encourage certain things and discourage other things. And so
Absolutely.
that practice of sort of finding your center, the way it usually gets referred to, is really just being able to not feel like you're missing something, right? And because I feel like when people get scared or they get like excited, they start to feel, oh no, like I don't know what to do, right? And that's where, again, if you have a more well-rounded thing, you might be wrong, but at least you think you have something to do. You're not just going to be paralyzed, right? And so,
Right.
because this is where I think a lot of um, when you see people demonstrate a technique, the person attacking them is almost always aware of when the technique is going to happen, right? And that creates this sort of unconscious psychic thing that doesn't happen in real life, right? This is why getting
Sure.
hit by someone who's mad at you hurts more than getting hit by someone who's not mad at you,
Hmm.
right? There's something that comes with it when there's a violent intent behind it versus just a desire to win a match, right? And that's something I think that really can't be replicated, right? It's like there's just something different about when it happens in real life because there isn't that moment where it's like, okay, now, and it starts. You don't know when the starting gun is going to go off exactly, right?
Mhm.
And that's where um again, this stillness of mind allows you to not jump the gun, but also not be too late to the start, right? It allows you to hear that and to do something right at that moment, And I think that's where Xing Yi is the quote unquote lowest level of this because it's just working on that part. It's just like, all right, all that matters is that initial, contact and who wins the first exchange. Because
Mhm.
if you defeat the person in the first exchange, you can move on to the next person, right? Where if you don't, then you have to keep dealing with that first person.
So we end the interview with Master Huang. He says, the interviewer asks, "Do you think beginning students should learn Xingyi first?" And he says, "I think Xingyi is great for learning how to use your back in striking. This is often used in Bagua too, but many students who begin with Xingyi use too much power when practicing it. This is because the movements look so quick and powerful to the uneducated that they cannot resist tensing their muscles. I still think of my teacher's practice of starting a student out in Tai Chi as the best. You must learn to relax, flow your energy, and fall into emptiness. Lo come." So that's his final statement. Before he says that Tai Chi to do really well is the hardest, and yet here he says to start, you should start with Tai Chi. because
Well,
that helps you relax and get that flow and that emptiness feeling
it's
rather
also
than
why wait to try to do the more
best
difficult.
thing, right?
It's like, well, that's the hardest one. You might as
Start
well
there.
start with that because it's going to
Right.
take the longest. I mean, but that's where I think you could also just do like Negong or something that's more direct, just like the swings and stuff. Will give you the same. But yes, the starting point of all internal martial arts has to be essentially relaxation. And to what degree kind of depends on which one you're doing, but none of them really work if you just go into it, with clenched shoulders and kind of tight breath and all that stuff. So this was Sun Ludong's whole thing about the Neja Chuan, right? The internal family, right? The reason these three martial arts are linked in the way they are is because of their use of these internal principles. It's not because of what they do on the outside.
Makes sense to me. All right. Well, that was fun. I think that shed some light on Master Wang's philosophy and approach. That was pretty fun.
All right, man.
All right. Check you next week.
Hey, folks, hope you enjoyed the episode there. Thanks for listening. You can head over to the Patreon for $5 a month. You can subscribe and get the bonus episode for every episode that comes out. $10 a month gets you the full archive with all the interviews and extended episodes, etc. All right, thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.